Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Formula S show, the Formula One show here on the SWW show network. Did I add too many W's in there?
SWWW. I think you had one too many. I think it was one
Yeah.
too many, but I'm unsure there.
I think the problem was the SW I did like super quick because normally I kind of space it out.
I think
So then I
went
just
SWWW.
Yeah,
I think that's what you did.
I was like, it doesn't feel right, but I don't know what doesn't feel right. Yeah, it's me, AJ. We got Mike. We are talking about the two city races, Monaco and Baku.
Baku?
Well done, Baku. That's the meme from that track. Not a lot to talk about, so it's probably going to be a little bit shorter show because it's only two races. But we got some good old controversy we get to talk about when we get to Baku.
Let's see, that is beautiful. But side note, so everyone's aware, if audio sounds better or worse, by the way, let us know. I am now in my new office, in the new house, and I think most things are set up here. So we want some feedback on what it sounds like here, because I need to decide, AJ, if I'm going to add those acoustic foam thingies or not in this office.
Well, you need to go to a standalone mic, not a headset, but...
Well, that's true. I have the mic somewhere, but it's not unpacked yet, / the soundboard's not unpacked yet, so that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I've been in this house for like 2.5 weeks. I apologize.
Yeah.
This is like the first room that's like almost truly set up.
Dude, I would have a box that's marked podcast. So then, even if it was like I had a couch and that was it, you could still get it done. Right, so we get to Monaco. Pomp and circumstance as always. No fans in the stands, but people were like on their balconies, which is kind of the unique part about Monaco, right? Like, there are stands, but most of the people that watch this from a balcony of the room that they're staying in. And, you know, I guess to get into it, like, obviously Mazepin was having issues, which we'll get into when we get to Baku, but, yeah, this is a track that Monaco clearly doesn't fit these cars. And I think the fact that F1 had some balls to schedule these two tracks back to back.
Just because city races, or?
Well, it's like, okay, you have your crown jewel, right, in Monaco. Nobody really likes the racing that goes on there. It's just the pomp and circumstance around that race. Now, you go to Baku, which is a new city circuit in terms of, you know, it's designed for these cars. Right, I think the first year was like 16 or 17. So these cars are, you know, they made the track wide enough for the cars, basically, where they could. Whereas Monaco, they can't change anything about it. Because, you know, this city's like 1,000 years old or something like that, so you can't, you can't widen streets there because you're knocking down buildings that, you know, you would have to pay tens of millions per, like, you know, tower. Like, if you had to remove one end room on a tower, that would be tens of millions of dollars. So, you know, it's not a great track in terms of race day. This is the perfect track. Like, if you only want to watch qualifying, Monaco is the track that you watch qualifying on. Because
Why?
Well, it's balls out and you can't make a mistake.
So it's high attention.
Yeah, it's risk reward. So, you know, every driver goes balls out in qualifying because they have to. But every other track, save for these two, you can make a mistake on every turn and be fine. Like, Monaco, you can't make any mistakes. I guess you could blow the chicane coming out of the tunnel, but that ruins your lap. So you can't really do that. Baku, you can screw up some of the turns because they have runoff areas, but I mean, you can't screw up the castle turn, right? Like,
You fuck it up, you get fucked up.
if you mess it up, your car's done. Um, but yeah, what we had, well, we had the first Monegasque on pole since I believe it was the mid 30s. Like, this just doesn't happen. Well, first off, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of Monegasques, right? Like, there are very few people that live in Monaco that are born and raised in Monaco. A lot of them are just there for the tax purposes. So it gets a little interesting there. But so Charles Leclerc obviously gets on pole, and then stuffs it, going for a faster lap. And I was actually very interested to see what Ferrari's response would be to him stuffing it, right? Like,
right.
Were they just going to fix, were they going to take the grid penalty and just fix the car? Or, which I think every team would have done that. Every team but Ferrari would have done that, right? Like, but Ferrari knows, like, as long as this car can basically limp around the track at speed, you can't pass here, so if he can stay out front, we get a win. Whereas, like, even Red Bull and Mercedes would have taken the hit to change the gearbox. So, they don't change it, and then race day comes out, they get the car. He didn't even make it onto the formation lap. Like, because they have to get out of the pits, and then they do a lap to get to the grid. When he was doing that, he noticed something was wrong. So he didn't even get to, like, figure out a strategy of how he's going to run this race. So obviously it was very, the ultimate high and then the ultimate low within 12 hours, which has got to be tough. And then there was a lot of discussion. I remember hearing it on the radio, like, I believe it was Red Bull was asking, like, does that mean we move up? Like, I forget who it was in second, but are they going to take first? And then, they shuffle the positions up. And then the FIA comes back and says, like, no, we're leaving that space open because, he technically qualified there, but he's not going to start. So, like, if you wanted to start from the pit lane, they will, from time to time. Normally, like, if you're going to start from the pit lane, though, like, it's because you've taken a bunch of penalties to fix the car. So you would have started from the back anyway. So you don't normally see the grid being shuffled from something like that. So it is what it is. I would say this race, Monaco and Spain are two of the races that you can just fall asleep during. Because not a lot happens. Now, obviously, there was the, longest pit stop in the world where the wheel nut fused itself onto Valtteri's car. Which, I don't know, did you watch the race or just the, YouTube thing?
I watched bits and pieces of it. I always go back to the YouTube ones to kind of fully catch that part, but I try to catch some of the race. Yeah,
like, they show as the gunner hits the gun to start to loosen the nut, it just shreds the threads. Like, you see the aluminum just flying out from behind the nut. So they were never going to get that off. It had just fused itself on. So, Valtteri has to retire, so Mercedes is now down to Lewis. And then it becomes...
Mercedes has been not doing this hot... Mercedes and Ferrari this year, both of them are, not.
Well, no, Ferrari's doing very well. Ferrari,
Mercedes, I'm there, yeah.
Ferrari, I would say, is overachieving. and Mercedes, I think like what's the what's the law that like everything regresses back to the mean?
I know you're talking about, but
Yeah.
I don't know the name of it. Yeah.
Like there's a law in, I don't know if it's just like psychology or whatever, um, in which that everything regresses to the mean.
Mhm.
So somebody can do very well, but they're eventually going
Push
to
and
come
pull
back.
idea.
What's that?
It's a push and pull idea, kind
Yeah.
of.
Well, it's more of even if you
Like
even if you
it's
run
where
away, you're
politics.
going to.
I was gonna compare it to like politics, where in theory the like stuff switches parties every couple years in America. It's the same idea.
Mm,
That'd be the psychology argument.
not necessarily, because like the argument that you want, like if you want to relate it to politics, right? Like it would be like we're seeing the rise of the extreme sides, right? The extreme left and extreme right. Those will only go so far before they will everything regresses to the mean, right? So everything eventually comes back to like the party basics,
Yeah.
right? So it may take a while, but everything does regress back to that mean. So it was only a matter of time before Mercedes just couldn't sustain that prolonged success. And Red Bull obviously was the one clearly chasing them. I mean, Ferrari fell off the face of the earth there for the last 2 years. So, I feel like it's been interesting, right? Because normally it felt like last year, if Mercedes made a mistake, Red Bull made a mistake as well. Right, so Red Bull was never able to capitalize on mistakes. Right, when Lewis blew out his tire at Silverstone and had to do an entire lap with 3 wheels, Max wasn't able to make up that gap because of strategy calls. Obviously, you can't predict that Lewis is going to lose a tire, but it's Red Bull was never able to capitalize last year. This year, Red Bull is like they have seized the means of production. Right, they are able to more or less take what they want when they want. Right, they can look at any track this year and be like, we're confident Max can take it to the Mercedes. And the thing used to be, right, like it was Max versus Mercedes. That used to be the belief, right? But now that Valtteri is kind of like, I don't know exactly what's going on there, right? But it feels like this weird thing of the team doesn't want Valtteri there, but Valtteri wants to be there. So it's this weird thing of like, well, it goes back to that when what race was it where Valtteri gets pole and the garage doesn't care. Nobody's making a move that Valtteri got pole position.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, obviously it had started before then, but that moment, I think, really cemented in people's minds. Like, Mercedes doesn't want Valtteri here, but they need him to fulfill his contract. So, it's going to be this weird kind of Red Bull situation where, Red Bull has been trying to find somebody that can complement Max since Max got the first seat. And the problem is, like, if you pay attention to the Red Bull Junior Academy, like, they rush people through. The second they see any sort of success, they get bumped up to the next level. Mm-hmm. So, like, these kids aren't given a chance to figure out, like, the car or to figure out, the team or any of that. They just get a rocket strapped to their ass if they start to win. And it's extremely detrimental to, to somebody's psyche. Like, if you're getting tossed into a different car every other week, how can you expect to perform?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You barely get a chance to learn the car, and then you're on to the next one. So, that second seat was always the next junior from, at that time, Toro Rosso, now AlphaTauri. And I mean, like, they would just take the kid and be like, okay, you're in Red Bull now. And it was so detrimental to the psyche of that second driver. And you saw him fall apart, right? Like, Pierre was miserable at Red Bull. Now that he's at AlphaTauri, like, anytime you see Pierre Gasly, he is smiling. Like, he is genuinely happy with where he's at. And Alex Albon, now you see him, obviously he's not in F1 right now, he's in DTM, but, I've seen interviews with him, and he is genuinely happy. Like, there's this weird, I don't know, it seems to be a culture thing about Red Bull, in which, like, that second seat is extremely, I don't know if it's toxic or, the expectations are way too high. There's always something wrong with that seat. But now that they have a proven driver in Sergio Perez, like, he has been able to take the fight to make it Red Bull versus Mercedes, not Max versus Mercedes. So it's been fun to see that, and for Red Bull to end up getting the win in Monaco, and hold on, let me pull up the points because they did very well in Monaco. For them to do that, like, you just don't, it's tough, right? Like, you can't just be, oh yeah, Sergio finished fourth. So you've got first and fourth, like, and Lewis finished seventh. So, it's one of those situations where Red Bull could take this thing the distance this year in terms of the constructors, because Mercedes always used to wrap up the constructors super early. And then it came down to their two drivers. But now, there's some fight. And obviously, congrats to Carlos and Lando. Like, those guys drove a hell of a race in Monaco. Vettel gets fifth. Pierre gets sixth. Lewis gets seventh. Lance, eighth. So, a good showing for Aston Martin. Esteban in ninth. And then Antonio Giovinazzi in 10th. So, Alfa Romeo gets a point. Double points finish for Aston Martin. Double points for Red Bull. Big points for Red Bull. McLaren gets a third. So we're seeing a more varied result sheet. It's not like it used to be.
It used to be very consistent, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, like, you could, in 2019 and 2020, you could effectively say, okay, the podium is Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen, RNG, the three numbers to see who's going to win. Like, obviously, normally it was Hamilton, but, take dice, assign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, throw 3 sets of dice, and there's your podium. Right? You could pretty easily figure out who's going to be on the podium, but now we're seeing, I think we're seeing some of these teams, like, figure out not necessarily, like, figure out the performance, but it's, a lot of teams now, like, okay, so Red Bull has 2 senior drivers, and Sergio and Max. Aston Martin has Vettel. I mean, he's a 4-time world champ, right? Like, you will take that. Anybody would take that. Ferrari's got Carlos and Charles. Like, Carlos is a senior driver. It may not seem like it, but he's a senior driver. He's been around for a while. Lando with McLaren, right? They have Daniel Ricciardo. Alpha Tauri, like, Pierre's gonna become a senior driver by the end of this year. Like, every team Alpine has, Esteban and Fernando. Like, obviously it's the first year back for Fernando, but he's a two-time world champion, right? Like, he's a senior driver. Kimi at Alfa Romeo, like, obviously Williams and Haas are the two teams that don't have senior drivers, but that's because those teams are feeder teams, right? Like, Mercedes pulls a Williams driver to put into Aston Martin, right? Like, that's what happened with Stroll. Stroll was a Williams driver, and then his dad saved Racing Point, and then Lance ends up there. So, I think it has to do more with the experience is now more widely spread. Because it used to be super concentrated. So, and then we get to, speaking of history,
Woofda.
We got a good old-fashioned tire controversy.
Okay, so walk us through it.
Okay. Azerbaijan. There we go.
That's a word.
Yeah. That's a... I don't even... Like, what language would that be? Because that's like...
Swedish?
Well, Azerbaijan? No, that's in the Middle East.
Oh, I got no clue.
It's a former Soviet state, but it's considered like Middle East area. Like, it's by Georgia and...
so by Alabama?
No. So I don't. Are they Arabic? Or I genuinely don't know the history of Azerbaijan. I know apparently it was where oil was first discovered in the world. So yeah. But so Pirelli told the teams the hard tire on the track should last 40 laps.
Okay.
So the teams are planning their strategy around the tires lasting 40 laps. Which, if you're told that's how long it's going to last, that you're expecting it to last that long, right? Like, the tires on your car are expected to last like 60,000 miles normally. So as a consumer, you expect your tires to last 60,000 miles, barring some, getting like a puncture or something like that, right? So you can strategize around that because you're not expected to like be constantly monitoring the life of your tire, right? Like, you're not expected to do that. Like, if somebody tells you it's going to last this long, then you kind of expect and hope that it lasts that long.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, this didn't really make a ton of news, but Pirelli told the FIA that they wanted to decrease the tire pressure by 1 psi. Which is fine, right? Like, obviously it's going to change the characteristics of that tire, and how it heats up and how it cools down and stuff like that, but 1 psi for you and I is nothing, right? Like,
right.
Your 4 tires could be completely different psis. But with a race car that's designed around a tire that's going to last 40 laps at a certain psi, because you expect the inner pressure to build right as it's running, so you can set up a car around that pressure building. So, your setups are designed to get the tires to their operating temperatures as quickly as possible. So if the pressures are suddenly changed, it was like changed a week of.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, no testing. Like, the first time that these tires got out there was during practice. And they seemed to be fine. And then, well, I mean, first off, like, let's get back to qualifying. Like, again, Leclerc, another pole. There were, well, it was 5 red flags, I believe, during qualifying, if I remember right, due to crashes. It was hilarious. And, because again, like, these city tracks, you can't screw up. Because there's zero runoff, so they can't throw a yellow. They have to stop what's going on. So it is what it is. Whatever, who cares? And so, the teams start the race expecting the hard to last 40 laps. This race was 51 laps long. So you could be expected to pit around, 10 to 13 and go on to hards and make it a one stop. Because the tires should last to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine and dandy. Stroll, well, excuse me, I believe it was I forget who went first. Well, Ocon pitted like right away because his engine failed. Russell ended up DNFing, but I believe that was just because he was lapped so many times. It might have been Alonso. Somebody like lap 2 or 3 went on to hards. I think just testing to see, like, okay, let's feel these things out to see how bad they really are or how good they are.
Mm-hmm.
How quote unquote bad. And so Stroll pits on 13, goes on to hards. So he's clear to the end, right? Nobody's expecting him to make another stop. Commentators, the other teams, Aston Martin, Pirelli, like everybody's expecting him to make it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Lap 34, I believe it was. So these tires are like 25, 28 laps old, something like that. It was somewhere in that region. Nowhere near their 40 lap lifespan. And all of a sudden, Stroll has a flat left. Like, explosive flat left. And smacks into the wall at 185 miles an hour. And it took him a while. It was a considerable amount of time before a safety car was called. Even a virtual safety car. Like, there were waved yellows where he crashed, which means, like, you have to slow down in that area. But there's no way to get Lance out of the car without him endangering himself, right? Like, getting onto the racing line. So it took, for whatever reason, it took him forever to throw the safety car. They finally throw the safety car. And during the safety car period, I feel really bad for, I believe it was the safety car period, Nicholas Latifi. On his radio, or no, it was during the next one, but we'll get to kind of why this is confusing later, but he gets a stay out, stay out, stay out call, which means you stay on the track. And then all of a sudden, as he's passing the entrance to pit lane, in his ear, he goes, "In pit lane." And he's like freaking out on the radio because he's like, "You told me to stay out." Stay out means stay out of the pit lane. So it was just incredible that, that happened. And then it was, okay, so Stroll's was actually on lap 29.
Okay.
So the tires were very young. He had maybe 20 laps on them, if that. So half their life. And they blew out. And so, drivers pit onto hards at that point because some of them had been like nursing their tires to be into the clear for a one stop. Basically, all the top guys are doing it. Sebastian Vettel was doing it too. Like, he started on the mediums because he started in 11th. He started on the mediums so he could do like I forget exactly how long it said the tires would last, but he could do, I think it was 7 or 8 more laps on the mediums. Which, when it's only a 51 lap race, that's a huge difference. Right, because that means his hards are going to be 8 laps fresher when it comes down to the end. So it'll have more life in the tire. So he's actually looking really good for a really good position. Max is on hards at this point. Lap 45. And exact same thing. Flat left, explosive flat left. And it throws Max into the right side wall. So Lance went into the left side wall. Max goes into the right side wall.
Okay.
And this is right as the pit lane was starting to form, where the dashed line was, to signify the pit lane. Max got extremely lucky, because if he went left the way that Lance did, he was going to hit a barrier, like T-bone the pit lane wall. It would have been very bad. So he got extremely lucky. Max got out of his car and kicked his tire. He was walking around before the safety car was thrown. They took even longer with Max's incident to throw any flag, let alone a full course and then a safety car. And the first thing everybody was wondering, like, what the hell happened to these tires? Like, neither of those tires should have done what they did, right? They should have been fine. And so they end up throwing a red flag to clear out Max's car. And they're so they're on the right side of the track. This is where Latifi's radio message gets interesting. They're on the right side of the track. You need to go left to go into the pit lane. And he's like, they're driving effectively down the middle of the road. And Latifi hears, stay out, stay out, stay out. So he drives around it's effectively a construction equipment that they use to move the cars. And he's just driving along. And then he gets the message like, no, you told me to stay out. The problem is he's going to take the penalty for it, right? They can't penalize the team. They have to penalize the driver because the driver stayed out. So it was pretty bad. So they red flag the race, stop the race. People can go in, fix damage, but it has to be like for like parts. So if you damaged your front wing, for example, Lewis Hamilton had worn a hole into the front of his nose, just from it hitting the ground. So he was able to replace his front nose section with the same front nose, right? Same wing setting, same everything. The crucial thing is during a red flag period, you're allowed to change your tires. So that's one of the reasons why they threw the red, right? Was to get everybody off these hards because they didn't want more of this shit happening. So everybody's just trying to find whatever tires they have for a 6-lap sprint. And, whatever they can get, right? Like, what's the newest stuff that we have? Well, because Vettel didn't make it into Q3, he had a fresh set of softs. So here's a 4-time world champion driving what is effectively last year's Mercedes with a brand new set of the stickiest tires they have. He went from being in a good position to get a good set of points to being in a good position to win this race.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a radio message from the Red Bull like team engineer, not just like driver engineer, but the team engineer, to FIA saying like, look, we had no warning that tire was going to go because they have sensors all over. Like they can tell if a tire's had a little puncture in it because they can see the PSI dropping, hundredths of a percent.
Like, it shouldn't be going down. What's going on?
Right. Yeah. Right. They can see if there's a slow puncture laps and laps and laps ahead of when they actually fix it. The fact that Red Bull came over the radio and was like, we had no warning, basically told everybody, get off the hards, choose whatever other tire you have, right? Because who knows? These tires are going to explode. And the interesting thing was they had, on the broadcast, they showed one of the cars, and they had tried to tarp over the tire so that the cameras couldn't see the tire. But what it looked like, because they did an extremely terrible job of it, was it seemed as if the the tread of your tire, right? So the contact patch that hits the road, and then you have the sidewall, which is effectively what holds it up. It looked like what had happened was the tread had separated itself from the sidewall. Like somehow the sidewall has shredded itself off of the tread, and then that's why it lost pressure. So that's not great, right? Like that's a terrible thing to have happen. So Hamilton's in second at this point, and they're going to do a standing start because that's how F1 does their things, right? They NASCAR would be a rolling start, Indy would be a rolling start unless it's on a road, so a lot of series have their restart procedures. Mm-hmm. F1, they can choose either a standing or a rolling start. Well, the only time they would use a rolling start is if it's bad weather, which it was a beautiful day. So they weren't going to do that. So they were going to do a standing start. So everybody gets around. Sergio Perez is in first, and Hamilton is in second. Hamilton gets a killer start, and it's like Sergio just like he does the right thing of he kind of forces Hamilton to make a decision, right? Like either Hamilton needs to pray that the car has grip in it and like slingshot past Sergio and try to make the turn, or he needs to slow down and go around. Well, he picked option C, which was his brakes locked up the second he touched them, and it shot him off into the runoff. Now, apparently, I didn't realize this until somebody was talking about it on the broadcast. Mercedes has an option in their computer that the driver can select that takes the brake bias from 51% or whatever the driver's at currently to 85% to the front.
Wow.
To effectively, the reason they do that is when they do that so when they're getting ready to go on the grid, they have all this heat in the front brakes. Because the way carbon ceramic brakes work, they need to be up to temperature before they really start to grip the pads. Otherwise, they're pretty slick. So, I mean, it's a smart idea. Like, you can heat up your brakes, and it actually heats up the tires, too, because the heat radiates out from the brakes and heats up the tires from the inside out. It's thermodynamics. It's, I barely know any of it, and there's no way I could explain it all. Well, somehow, Hamilton, who is known for being, like, the smartest driver on the grid, forgets to turn that off. So he's going into turn one, expecting to have 51% brake pressure on the front. Instead, he has 85, so he locks up and just shoots off. And so everybody goes through. And there were a couple good battles. The best battle was between Vettel and Gasly, as Gasly was trying to defend from Vettel, but I mean, Vettel had fresh softs. You're not going to defend from that. So Vettel gets past and is chasing down Sergio Perez. Like, it looks like there's a chance Vettel could win this race. But he probably needed 2 more laps to do it. Race ends. Perez wins. Vettel second. Gasly third. Leclerc fourth. So kind of a really good rebound from him from not even starting in Monaco. Lando gets fifth, so he goes, podium to top 5. That's very good. Alonso's sixth. Good showing for Alpine. Tsunoda gets 7th, so again, another double points for AlphaTauri. Sainz goes 8th, so double for Ferrari. Ricciardo goes 9th, so double for McLaren. And Kimi gets a point. So, back-to-back races where, yeah, they only got 1, but Alfa Romeo is getting points, right? Like, these 2 points are going to be huge at the end of the year. Because when it comes down to Haas, Williams, Alfa Romeo, where you're at in the standings, that's a lot of money. It's millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So, good on them for getting some points there. Kind of give them a little cushion. And our DNFs were, as I said, Russell, who I believe he DNF'd. He DNF'd on 48, which would make me believe that he just knew he didn't have the pace.
Mm-hmm.
So he just pulled it in and saved the car. Max on 45 with his crash. Lance on 29 with his crash. Ocon on 3 with an engine that blew up. So we had 4 guys DNF. 3 were reliability. 2 of them were not car reliability. So, this is proof that this year could be the year that Red Bull really takes it to Mercedes, because neither Mercedes scored points. Right? Valtteri finishes 12th, Hamilton 15th. So now, if we look at the team standings, Red Bull's got 174, Mercedes has 148. This is the first time since 2017 that Mercedes wasn't in first. It was some crazy stat that they were talking about. And I think technically Red Bull took it in Monaco, but this was the biggest gap since 2017 or something like that. But again, so Red Bull's in first, Mercedes second, Ferrari third, McLaren fourth. There's 2 points between Ferrari and McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go down to AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. There's 3 between them. I guess 2. It's 37 to 39. And then you've got Alpine with 25, so they're solidly in 7th right now. Like I said, Alfa Romeo's got 2. Haas and Williams both have 0. So that puts Alfa Romeo at 8th right now, giving them probably $3 or $4 million at the very least, more than what they would have gotten, if they were in 9th. So those points are huge for them right now. And I mean, looking at the schedule, right? So we're at France, Austria, which France and Austria are speed tracks. Silverstone is a mix, so it'll be interesting to see. Hungaroring's a speed track. Belgium's a speed track. Netherlands, we don't know because we didn't go there last year. Italy's a speed track. Russia's a technical track. Singapore is Well, they're not running Singapore. I guess that's part of the news. They dropped Singapore. Um, the replacement hasn't been confirmed yet. Japan, technical track. US, a mix of technical and speed. Mexico, speed track. Like, that is a dead speed track. Brazil, technical. Australia, speed. Saudi Arabia, nobody knows. Abu Dhabi, technical. So, like, Red Bull may not be the fastest car, but once we get to some of these technical tracks, they could do it. Like, Red Bull could take this championship to Mercedes. And Verstappen could win a title, right? Like, if we look at the standings for the drivers, Max has 105, Lewis has 101. Neither of them scored points in Azerbaijan. So, they were awash there. But I mean, Valtteri's in 6th right now. To show you kind of like both Red Bulls, Lando and Charles are above Valtteri. If Mercedes wants to take the fight to Red Bull, they need Valtteri to be 4th or 5th at the very least in the drivers. He's 6th right now. He's 5 points behind Charles, and he's 19 behind Lando.
Jesus. Okay.
So Mercedes is like, we're doing our part. Valtteri, we need you to do yours. I mean, he's having a halfway decent season for anybody not in a Red Bull or Mercedes. So, yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting second 2/3 of the year, second half of the year. But, yeah, a lot to look forward to when it comes to Formula 1, as Sacha Baron Cohen says it in Talladega Nights.
Amen.
Formula 1. But yeah, I think that wraps it up for the episode. Mike, what do you have coming up for SWW stuff?
I was just pulling that up now. So this comes up on the.
We've got a lot of interviews.
We have some interviews piling up. In theory, there will be us watching F9 at some point. It gets weird because I think it actually releases in the States at the end of the month, which always fucks with our schedules.
Yeah, if I remember right, F9's at the end of the month, so I think, if I remember right, we were talking about doing that as the July, June 25th,
movie?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be, I mean, unless we saw it and did it that week, like.
Which I really doubt will happen, just because I think my schedule's, I think I'm out that week. I think I'm in Minnesota. So yeah, I bet you it will be a July thing. I bet you what's gonna realistically happen is, F9 will probably post 4th of July week, and the week after would be SWW. We just push that back a week would make the most sense. But that's kind of TBD. But keep that in mind, people. Go watch F9 if you can in theaters safely, whatever you do. Roughly when it comes out, and then in a week or so, we will have an old-fashioned movie club for it. And I think that's it. No live things, obviously. Not live things. No conventions, obviously, happening, really. We do our streams most or every Wednesday. And I think we're going to go back to Raft next week. AJ is what I'm thinking, probably for a stream.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I think that's it. I think it's kind of same old, same old. Keep an eye on our feeds. All of that fun stuff. hopefully my audio quality starts getting better as I slowly beef out the office correctly with stuff. And yeah. Hire AJ. I think that's the end of it.
Yeah.
This episode is partially brought to you by the Humble Choice program. Did you know Humble Bundle has a great monthly subscription service that lets you get a ton of video games every single month? That's right, from plans range from $5 to $20 a month, you get a hold of a bunch of free games they have available to you. And you could use our code down in the description below to go and sign up. It would help our podcast and help you see what great games are available for you this month.
This podcast was a production of The SWW Show. To learn more, go to theswwshow.com. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at TheSWW Show. You can follow me at Mikey_Maroney. You can follow AJ at LowSeatBoy. Remember, new episodes premiere on Friday, 9 a.m. Central Time on anchor.fm/SWW and podcast services around the globe.